This morning, June 30th, 2026, turn on any screen in the world and you will hear one sentence repeated like a chant. Iran broke the ceasefire. The footage is dramatic. A burning hull in the dark water of the Strait of Hormuz. A tanker, the Seahawk Meridian, Liberian flagged, loaded with crude, drifting and smoking after an Iranian drone strike. Then the response. American Central Command announces precision strikes on a dozen Iranian coastal positions. And the president posts a single line that gets quoted on every channel, that Iran is playing a very dangerous game, and that America's patience is not infinite. That's the story. Aggressor and responder. Villain and sheriff, clean. Simple. Repeated everywhere. Now, let me show you the one sentence that breaks the whole story apart. It's not a tweet. It's not a leak. It's a clause in a document the United States signed with its own hand. And once you read it, you will never see this conflict the same way again. Stay with me, because by the end of the next half hour, I'm going to show you that this isn't a story about a tanker. It's a story about a trap. And the country caught inside it is not the one you've been told. Before I go one sentence further, I want to be completely clear about who I am and what this is. I am not a government official. I do not work for any government, any intelligence agency, any military, any political party, or any state in this conflict. I have no inside access, no classified briefings, and no special channel to anyone in power. I am an independent analyst reading the same public documents, public statements, and public reporting that you can read yourself. Everything I say here is my own interpretation and analysis of openly available information. It is commentary and opinion, not fact reporting, and not advice of any kind. I will tell you when I'm certain, I'll tell you when I'm speculating, and I will always point you to the primary sources so you can check my reasoning and disagree with me if you think I'm wrong. That's the whole point of this channel, to think out loud together, not to be told what to believe. With that said, let's get into it. The agreement everyone is arguing about has a name. The Doha Maritime Understanding, the ceasefire framework brokered last month after the Strait conflict, ground the global oil market to a halt. Now, the media will mention the agreement. They'll say Iran violated it. But notice something. Not a single one of them will read you the actual text. They'll summarize it. They'll characterize it. They'll tell you what it essentially means. But they won't put the words on the screen and let you read them. So let me do what they won't. The relevant clause, and I'm reading the operative language, states that Iran shall undertake through its own competent authorities to organize and supervise the orderly transit of commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz for a defined transitional period. Read that again slowly. Through its own competent authorities, organize and supervise. That is not the language of a country promising to behave. That is the language of a country being handed a job. The phrase, organize and supervise, is administrative language. It means Iran is the entity that designs the system. Iran decides the lanes. Iran decides the procedures. Iran decides who is cleared and who is not. There is no line in that clause giving the United States a coordinating role. There is no line giving a multinational task force authority over the lanes. There is no line giving anyone else a vote. The document, the one America signed, names exactly one supervising authority over the most important choke point on planet Earth, Iran. So when Iran announced last week that the only cleared transit lane was the inner channel, the one hugging Iranian territorial waters, and that vessels deviating from it would not be recognized as cleared traffic, Iran was not tearing up the agreement. Iran was doing the job the agreement assigned to it. Let that settle. America didn't just lose a war of bombs here. America may have signed a piece of paper that does more damage than any missile Iran ever fired. Let me ground all of this in something you can't argue with. Traffic data. Before the dispute over the lanes erupted, daily transits through the strait had recovered to roughly normal levels. Call it the high 60s to low 70s of vessels a day. That's the strait doing what the strait does. 20% of the world's seaborne oil flowing through a waterway barely 30 kilometers wide. Then Iran issued its lane clearance rules. And the numbers started falling, not because of bombs, because of paperwork. Because shipping companies, insurers, and charterers do one thing above all else. They avoid ambiguity. The moment there were two competing authorized lanes and a live dispute over which one was real, the prudent move for any captain was to wait. Within 72 hours, daily transits had collapsed by roughly a third. Sit with what that means. Iran didn't have to sink a fleet to choke the strait. Iran had to publish a rule and let the global insurance industry do the rest. A document and a press release achieved what 100 missiles could not. That is the signature trap working in real time, Iran exercising paper authority, and the world's risk-averse shipping market enforcing it for them. And here's the brutal part for Washington. Every drop in that number is a headline. Every headline says the same thing. The most powerful navy in human history cannot guarantee passage through a strait you could swim across. That's not a military problem. That's an identity problem. And identity problems, as we're about to see, are the ones empires cannot solve with force. Now, I never want you to just take my framing and run with it. So let me build the strongest possible version of the American case, not a straw man. The real, serious version that a competent State Department lawyer would make. Because if I can't beat the best version of the other argument, I haven't earned your trust. Here it is. The clause says Iran shall organize transit so that it is orderly and safe. That word matters. A safety obligation is an obligation. When an Iranian drone slams into a civilian tanker carrying 2 million barrels of crude, that is, by definition, the opposite of safe, orderly transit. So, regardless of which lane the ship was in, Iran breached the core purpose of the clause the instant it attacked a commercial vessel. And under international law, a material breach by one party releases the other party from its corresponding obligations and can justify proportionate countermeasures. That argument is not stupid. I want to be honest with you, it has real legal weight. Treaty law genuinely does recognize that a material breach changes the obligations of the other side. If you stop reading right here, America has a defensible position. But here's the hole the steelman cannot cover. If America genuinely wanted safe, orderly transit, and the agreement makes Iran the supervisor of that transit, then the logical American move is to work with the supervisor on the lanes. You don't unilaterally create a second, competing lane outside the supervisor's system and then claim breach when the supervisor doesn't honor a lane it never approved. Think about it like a contract for a delivery route. If I sign a deal making you responsible for managing the delivery road, and I actually want safe deliveries, I coordinate the route with you. I do not pave my own secret road across your property and then sue you when you don't recognize it. America paved its own road. That's the problem. The safety argument only works if America was operating inside the system the treaty created. It wasn't. It built a parallel system and demanded recognition for it. And when you create the very conditions of a dispute and then use the dispute as a justification to bomb, the legal high ground crumbles underneath you. The vice president said it himself, almost as an accidental confession. He said if Iran has concerns about the strait, they can pick up the phone. But America struck before any phone call could happen. You cannot bomb a man and then tell him he should have called you. So here's the question that should be keeping strategists up at night. If at least some of the lawyers in that room understand that bombing makes America look like the party in breach, if they know the world is watching and assigning blame, then why can't America just stop? I want to give you two frameworks. Together I call them the cage, because that's what they build around a great power. A cage made not of walls, but of its own decisions. The first bar of the cage, the identity wound. There's an idea in international relations about something deeper than physical security. Nations don't only want to survive, they need their story about themselves to survive. The story of who they are. And for over 70 years, America's story has had one immovable pillar. We are the nation that keeps the global commons open. We keep the sea lanes free. We keep the oil flowing. When a tanker reaches a refinery safely, that's because we are standing watch. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a waterway in that story, it's the cathedral. It is the single most concentrated symbol of the entire American claim to be the indispensable guarantor of world order. So, when Iran, a country America has branded an outlaw state for nearly half a century, becomes the entity deciding which ships pass through that cathedral, it doesn't just embarrass America militarily. It attacks the load-bearing pillar of America's identity. And here's the thing about a wounded identity. It does not respond with strategy. It responds with anger. And anger never asks, is this proportionate? Or is this legal? Anger asks one question only. How do I prove right now that I'm still who I say I am? And America's answer to that question, since 1945, has always been the same. You strike. You show force. You make the story feel true again. That's why the bombs fell within hours of the tanker, not because it was the smart move, but because it was the move that let America feel like America again. The second bar of the cage, escalation of commitment. You might know this as the sunk cost fallacy. When you've poured enormous resources into something, money, lives, reputation, admitting it was a mistake becomes psychologically unbearable, because admitting the mistake retroactively turns all that sacrifice into waste. So instead of stopping, you double down, hoping the next push finally makes it all worth it. Look at what America has already sunk into this. Tens of billions in operations, depleted munitions, stockpiles, the credibility of its Gulf security umbrella after Allied bases took thousands of incoming drones and missiles, a war powers fight tearing through its own Congress, and a global press, even sympathetic outlets, increasingly writing that America did not win this war. Now imagine being the president, and an advisor walks in and says, "Sir, to honor the deal correctly, we have to formally acknowledge Iran's authority over the Strait lanes and coordinate the routes with Tehran." What that sentence actually means is, everything we spent was for nothing, because the enemy still controls the strait, because the paper we signed gave it to them. No leader can say that out loud. The bigger the sunk cost, the more politically impossible the admission. So instead of stopping, you escalate. And every new strike is really just an attempt to justify the last strike, which creates more sunk cost, which makes stopping even harder. That's the cage. Wounded identity produces anger. Anger produces escalation. Escalation produces sunk cost. Sunk cost makes stopping feel worse than continuing. And so the door locks tighter with every move. America isn't bombing Iran because it has a path to victory. America is bombing Iran because stopping has become more frightening than going on. And I want to be clear, this is not uniquely American. Rome did it. The Ottomans did it. The British Empire did it. Every great power, when its identity gets fused to a conflict, walks into this exact cage. The only question is ever how long before the cage exhausts the empire inside it. Now I want to add the layer that almost no major outlet is connecting properly. Because while America and Iran trade drones and airstrikes over the meaning of one clause, there is a country standing just outside the room, watching and slowly absorbing a realization that I can only describe as betrayal. That country is Israel. And to understand why, you have to understand what this war was actually for, at least according to one long-running strategic vision. For decades, there has been a logic operating beneath the surface of regional policy. Methodically remove every power capable of challenging Israeli dominance. The list is long, and you know the names. And Iran was always understood as the final, most serious challenger standing. The idea was, break Iran, and Israel becomes the undisputed regional anchor, the organizing center of a new order underwritten by American power and Israeli capability. Some call it the Greater Israel Project. I've called it a bid for regional hegemony, a pax built around one state. But the war didn't end the way that vision required. Iran took staggering damage. Its air defenses, much of its conventional infrastructure, its command structure all battered. But the state did not collapse. The decentralized military structure held. The regime did not surrender. And a vision built on total victory cannot survive a partial one. Because for Israel, Iran paused is not a win. Iran managed is not a win. Only Iran broken is a win. And Iran was not broken. Now look at the negotiating table in Doha. The United States was there. Iran was there. The mediators were there. And Israel, the frontline partner that flew alongside American aircraft for months, that absorbed the diplomatic cost of being painted as the war's instigator, had no seat. None. The country with the most at stake in the outcome was excluded from writing the outcome. Then the polling came in, overwhelming majorities of Israelis across the political spectrum, concluding that Iran came out ahead, that the agreement was a strategic disaster. That's not a fringe opinion over there. That's a national consensus. And then the American vice president, responding to Israeli frustration, reportedly told Israel to essentially wake up and face reality. Read that line carefully. That is not the language of an alliance between equals. That is the language of a patron who has decided he no longer needs the client. Here's the structural truth underneath all of it. America and Israel's interests have quietly diverged. Israel needs Iran defeated, fully, permanently. America needs out before the domestic and economic cost becomes unmanageable. You cannot have both, and when a great power is forced to choose between its allies' maximal goal and its own exit, it chooses itself. It always chooses itself. So the project that was supposed to crown this war is fracturing. Not because anyone changed their intentions, but because the war ended in the one outcome the project couldn't absorb: survival of the adversary. So, let me pull the whole structure together, because I think we're watching something far larger than a fight over a shipping lane. The clause hands Iran supervisory authority over the strait. America signed it. America then built a parallel lane outside that authority. Iran enforced its authority by striking a tanker in the unrecognized lane. America bombed in response. And now America cannot stop, because the cage of identity and sunk cost has closed around it. Traffic through the strait keeps falling, dragging the global economy with it. And the ally that was supposed to be the war's ultimate winner is watching its grand strategy crack, abandoned at the negotiating table and told to face reality. Two orders are straining at the same time. The American order, built on the claim to be the guarantor of the global commons, strained by a clause that handed the most symbolic commons on Earth to its enemy, and the regional hegemony project, built on the assumption of unconditional American backing, strained by an American partner that just negotiated the terms of Iranian power behind its back. When the old order is buckling and the new one hasn't taken shape, there's a vacuum. And vacuums in geopolitics are never empty for long. The real question isn't who wins the battle for the strait. The real question is, who gets to write the rules of whatever comes next? I don't want to leave you with theory. I want to leave you with 3 concrete things to watch, so you can test my analysis against reality yourself. First, watch which lane the next struck vessel was using if there's another strike. If Iran hits a ship in America's coastal lane, that's Iran continuing to enforce its treaty authority. Confident, doubling down, staying inside the agreement's logic. But if Iran strikes a ship in its own cleared northern lane, that's a completely different and far more dangerous signal. That would mean Iran has stopped enforcing the treaty and started escalating beyond it. Second, watch Israel, and specifically watch its independent moves. If Israel launches significant new operations on its own initiative, acting on its own strategic interpretation rather than in coordination with Washington, that tells you the hegemony project is now being pursued without American cover. That's the moment the alliance stops being a chain of command and becomes 2 separate actors with separate plans. Third, watch the Gulf states: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar. These countries are terrified of being caught between a faltering American umbrella and a resurgent Iran that just proved it can choke the strait with a press release. If any of them quietly moves toward a bilateral arrangement with Iran, a maritime understanding, a non-aggression framework, that is the signal that the American-led Gulf security architecture is finished, and that the region has started building its own order without waiting for permission.